Mon David Adonai Roi Loechta Bino Istasha Yabiteni Ame Menuchoi Sina Haleni Nafshi Yeshoive Yancheni B'magle Tzedek Man Shaloi Gam ki elech begeit al moves lo irara ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha hey menachamoni taroich levanai shulcha neget tarai tishanta b'shemen roshi kaisi revaya Achtoi v'chesed yirifuni kol yimei chayai v'shavti b'veis Adonai le'arech yamim. Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not lack. In lush meadows, he lays me down. Beside tranquil waters, he leads me. He restores my soul. He leads me on paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Though I walk in the valley overshadowed by death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Prepare a table before me in full view of my enemies. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We thank everyone, welcome everyone who's gathered together to pay our tribute, respect to Herbert Morton, Chaim ben Mordechai Halevi. And this is as we prepare to escort him to the next stages of his journey. I want to begin our relatively short ceremony this afternoon, being that it's Friday before the Sabbath, with a blessing that we make when we come to such a place. We're in the presence of the burial places of those who passed. And the blessing that I'll now say, which I'll say for all of us, you'll note, recognizes the justice of the creator of the universe, brought us into this world, gave us however many days that each and every one of us receives to do with what we will, guides us how to spend our time well, how to lead a life that is fulfilling, that is meaningful, productive, successful, and takes our lives as well when the time comes. And it's appropriate as we're struggling with the painful loss of a dear family member, a friend, community member of significance. It's appropriate that we recognize the justice with which God runs his world. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe. Fashioned you with justice, nourished and sustained you with justice, took your lives with justice, knows the sum total of you all with justice, and will restore and resuscitate you with judgment. Blessed are you, Adonai, who resuscitates the dead. You are eternally mighty, my Lord, the resuscitator of the dead are you, abundantly able to save. He sustains the living with kindness, resuscitates the dead with abundant mercy, supports the fallen, heals the sick, releases the confined, and maintains his faith to those asleep in the dust. Who is like you, O master of mighty deeds, and who is comparable to you, O King who causes death and restores life and makes salvation sprout, and you are faithful to resuscitate the dead. On behalf of the of the community, I want to start expressing on all our behalf our loving consolation to you, Herbert's family members, those who are here, those who are with us, joining us on the live Zoom. Particularly want to mention the beloved wife of some 60 plus years, Beverly, and the children, Mark, Cindy, Scott, and Kevin. And also hopefully being able to participate from a distance, Herbert's brothers, they should live and be well, Jeff and David, and family and friends. Although I was not someone who knew Herbert well, very, very personally, certainly known many of his beloved sons, son Kevin, daughter-in-law Julie, and two of his four beloved grandchildren, Daniel and Aaron, very well for many, many years. And so having learned a little bit more about who Herbert was, how he lived his nearly 87 years on this earth, and what he achieved and what he accomplished, I'm going to now share some biographical remarks. And then I'm going to ask as well, Mark and anyone else from the family who would like to speak as well. Born July 11, 1936 in Chicago, Herbert, who was a Levi, born to Max and Tilly Morton, who was the oldest of the brothers, and moved to Denver to take part in the family's wholesale magazine and book business. Seems that was Uncle Sam's success in Chicago, and he knew that was going to be an entree for his brother Max and for family. And Herb would inherit, it seems, the tremendous business acumen of the Morton family and take it perhaps even to, one might say, to the next level. Family came to Denver, living in Hilltop, in the midst of the Jewish community. He went to East High School and interestingly joins the Navy. Not so many Denverites joining the Navy, perhaps, but as a yeoman, which I come to learn that's a bookkeeper, he perhaps began to actualize some of his talents, both with numbers, with business, with understanding the way that to interact with people. He had many opportunities. He was a courier for President Eisenhower, and apparently there were stories of his being able to do errands and hobnob with the president at that time. In business with his father Herb, would help run the business as they opened it, if I understand, in Pueblo. Eventually moving to Pueblo with where he really exemplified himself as a tremendously successful entrepreneur with a great deal of success. The list of businesses was beyond my ability to get all of them that Herb created, starting, of course, with the book and magazine distribution warehouses. A favorite seems to have been Granny's old-fashioned ice cream bar, which served also, it seems, as a bookstore. The prejudice, it was described as the Barnes and Nobles before there was a Barnes and Nobles, where you could get books, records, and ice cream. And this was not nearly the end. Whether it was Pueblo Bank and Trust, a liquor store, other bookstore, and many other businesses, it seems that as Herbert developed himself in the professional world in Pueblo, that he owned everything on Main Street from 5th to 6th Avenue. And later, it seemed that he, in his involvement in community commercial affairs, was instrumental in perhaps ahead of his time in trying to bring to Pueblo a Vegas-style strip with gambling games. He was an influential businessman of note, and in all that, it allowed him to retire early in his 40s. A remarkable accomplishment that he was able to then, as we'll see, spend a tremendous amount of time with the love of his life, Beverly, traveling, enjoying, and engaging in very many beautiful activities, as he was really someone who took life by the reins, enjoyed, and wanted his family to enjoy. I spoke last night to Kevin and to Scott, and I was able to get out from them some of their lovely recommendations about their childhood. And being that Herb had the opportunity to do so, he loved to shower gifts on his family, particularly to his loving wife, Beverly, more than she would ever want to have. He insisted, loved to give gifts. He was a tremendously generous person, and he took good care of his kids who had opportunity to run. They had the run of the country club, pool, golf, tennis, take trips, Broncos games, not just in Denver on the fan bus, but California and other places. Even mystery trips where you had to show up with the right outfit, not knowing where you were going to go. It made it exciting. It made his kid's life exciting, filled with fun, filled with comfort and with good things. In those years, particularly before he retired, he would include the kids in advertising. They would be stars of TV ads, advertising the ice cream store and other things, TV commercials and print advertisements. When the parades would take place down the street in front of the ice cream shop, they recall being out there giving out free ice creams to those passing by. In the community in Pueblo, Herb was a member of and contributor, significant contributor as well, of the synagogue and the temple, where he would connect and where his kids would have their bar mitzvahs. Later in life as well, he was a member of the B'nai B'rith Bowling League. Apparently he had an opportunity potentially to go semi-pro. Didn't take it up, but he was there. He was also enjoyed in his later years volunteering. He was a volunteer at the airport as a navigator at the airport, apparently being like a helpful person to greet and to welcome people as they would come in. He also was a volunteer for the Pueblo Channel 8 PBS as a TV auctioneer. As you see, he was a remarkable person who got involved, accomplished an incredible amount, contributed, helped, accomplished. Another lovely story that was shared with me was that as the stock show would wind down, he would buy all the animals to make sure that the kids who would come to the stock show bringing their animals for sale, hoping to make some money with which they could maybe, go to college, he would buy all the animals, making sure that they got what they needed, and then he would give them back the animals. And want all the animals, he wanted to make sure that they had what they needed. Beautiful story, beautiful, caring mark of consideration, compassion. Herbert is described to me as a very charming person, witty, engaging. People enjoyed his company. He was fun to be with. And he wanted to see to it that things were done right. Note something that needed doing, he would get involved, he would do it. He was very generous with those he loved. He was extremely proud of his children and his 4 grandchildren. I want to mention Evan and Josh, Daniel and Aaron. Loved them very much. Very proud of them and their accomplishments. Amongst the memories that were shared and the quality of his qualities that were described to me, Scott mentioned that he was a role model in how to be calm when things were difficult and not to let difficult people get to him. He wouldn't bear a grudge. He would forgive and forget, a beautiful quality we should all aspire to be. He was resilient, even in his latter years when he dealt with quite a number of significant health challenges. he managed to bounce back. It was part of him. He's a resilient person. He was, if you called him, if you needed him, he was there. Kevin shared that he was a conscientious person. He was methodical. He could get things accomplished, and he would throughout his life, therefore, be such an accomplished person, contributing and succeeding in so many ways. And with that success, he showed his family a first-class life, traveling all over the world. Beverly shared with me that he would 21 times on their anniversary take her to Hawaii, her favorite place. Mm-hmm. They were regulars in Las Vegas, where they enjoyed being connected there, being able to connect with whomever they met. Traveling all over the world, many countries, Antarctica, and Africa, many wonderful places. Portrait of a life of achievement. He's respected, and he used what he accomplished to shower on his gifts and love and blessing and good things, good times and good things on his beloved family. Yehi zichro baruch, may his memory be for blessing. May everything that we've said here being a tribute to him. And I'd like to call now on the oldest son, Mark, who agreed to come and to share a few words with us.
It is with a sad heart that we gather here today. But I am happy to see all the people here to help us celebrate the life of my father. My mom and dad were married nearly 65 years. And in that time, they did have the four of us, me, Cindy, Scott, and Kevin. Two daughter-in-laws, Kevin's wife, Julie, and my wife, Tony. The four grandchildren that my dad loved, Evan, Josh, Daniel, and Aaron. And there was a granddaughter-in-law that my dad loved, and that's Evan's wife, Maddie. She's been a blessing to our family. My dad also had two brothers, Jeff and David. You know, it's always hard to find the right words to say at a time like this, but I do have some memories that I would like to share, and it's important to me. And I think for those of you who do know my father, you all realize that he is responsible for the Morton humor, the Morton belly, and also the Morton hairline. And he was quite a kibitzer. And I remember the sense of humor throughout my childhood and all the way through my life. And I think it's safe to say I'm really not to blame for my bad sense of humor, because it is my dad's fault. But technically, it's okay. And as Rabbi mentioned, my parents like to travel all over the world, and I remember Hawaii being one of their favorite places. I also remember Friday nights with our family. We would go to my grandparents' house. It wasn't just that it was every Friday. It was that it was an important tradition to the family. My dad did like to bowl, and he was very good at it. One year, my dad and my grandpa were in a bowling league together, and they had an opportunity or an opening that they had to fill. They had to make an immediate need to fill. And as a young teenager, they asked me to bowl with them. And I always remember how much fun I had with them. And I looked forward to, whether it was a Tuesday night or Wednesday night, I looked forward to it every week. And we did have season tickets to the Denver Broncos. And as a small child, it was amazing to go to the game and see how different it was in person and spend the time with my grandpa and my father. And then on the games that we didn't go to, that we would watch, and again, I was just a youngster, I'd always run down and ask my dad, who's playing? And he would tell me, and it really didn't matter to me because I didn't know who they were. I didn't know any of the players on the team. And we would always root for one team and root for the other and then go, oh, my team's winning or your team's winning. And the way I picked the team, or he let me pick the team, was I got to pick the team with the dark uniforms. And it seemed like the team with the dark uniforms had a better chance of winning. I didn't realize that was usually the home team. And most of the time, the home team has that advantage. But my dad let me win more than not. I also remember watching TV with him, and there were shows such as the original Mission Possible and the FBI that he had to watch regularly every week. I might add, that was when TV was actually really good too. It was mentioned that my dad was active with public broadcasting, and he was. And it was really neat to see him as a child when he was on TV and realized, I'm looking at my dad. He was just here at the house. And that's the same person that is now on television. And I always felt like a big shot when I would go back to school the next day and people would say, is that your dad? Yes, it was. And there was a time that I also worked at the Pueblo News Agency, which was the magazine and book company that my grandfather and dad had. And there were many mornings that my dad would look for me in the warehouse. And what I was doing was loading my van to make deliveries to convenience stores and grocery stores. And he would walk up to me, and I knew what he was going to say too. He'd say, hey, do you want to go out and have breakfast before you go out and start your deliveries? And I would always say yes, because number one, it was so much fun having breakfast with him, but it did always make me late getting back in the afternoon. And I recall how he worked with the dealers. The dealers were the accounts that they called them back in the day. And there was a point where I used to watch him sell in the new books and magazines, and he made it sound so easy. And then apparently I would go to school and tell my fellow classmates and teachers that my dad had a lot of dealers. And at back to school night, they would ask, exactly what does that mean? My mom and dad had to clarify that it was actually retail accounts. I didn't know. Years later, with my own family, we would travel to Arizona to visit my parents. And one of the topics of conversation on the drive down there would always be how hot it's going to be. And we weren't necessarily talking about how hot it was going to be in Arizona, 110, 115 degrees. We were often talking about how hot it's going to be in the house. My dad did not like to turn the air conditioning down. He liked the heat. So at night, when we would go to bed, the air conditioning would be on a cool temperature, and then I'd hear footsteps in the hallway. It was my dad getting out of bed to turn the air conditioning up. I'd wait for him to go back to bed. I would sneak out of the room and turn it back down because we were roasting. Moments later, my dad would be back out turning it up again. This went on many, many times throughout the evening. He just loved the heat. The next morning, he would deny that he ever did this. But we would wake up to waffles and coffee. My dad had a waffle maker in the house, and he loved to make them. And he would usually make enough waffles to last for a week, and then he'd repeat the process again the next morning. And as soon as he was done with his coffee and waffles, he'd head out in the backyard to sit in the heat. My dad loved my mom. And he loved her cooking. His favorite dish was a chicken dish that she made. But he also loved his sweets. And many times he would start with the sweets before dinner. We'd have to tell him, Dad, it's probably a good idea to eat dinner first. And he would just look at us and say, why? My dad was tough. About 8 years ago, my mother and my father were driving from Arizona to to Denver for a visit to all of us. During the drive, my dad had a stroke, actually behind the wheel. My mom, who doesn't like to drive on highways, actually had to take over and get him to the nearest city, to a hospital, which was in Trinidad. From there, they had to fly him flight for life to Denver, where we met him in the emergency room. He had to have surgery to open the vessels in his neck. One side was blocked 100%, the other was 98% blocked. The surgeon said that the first 24 hours following was crucial in his recovery in ICU. So we all were there, night and day. 24 hours, he didn't wake up yet. 48 hours went by, he still hadn't woken up. 72 hours go by, still not yet. The doctor calls the family into a conference room and says, listen, you really need the 2 and 24. We're not sure what to expect from this point on. This continued for 13 days. And on that 13th day, he woke up in ICU. And the first thing he said was, I want pancakes. He did spend the next 90 days in the hospital in rehab before going home. And he's had numerous conditions since that have affected his health. And earlier I mentioned the Morton humor, which now I'm no longer to blame for. Here's an example of some of the things. A few years ago, he was in the hospital, and I went to his room. It was during the Super Bowl, coincidentally, which we're close to right now, and I watched the game with him. It was early in the evening, about 5 o'clock. There was a knock on his door in the hospital room. My dad said, who is it? The person outside the door said, we're here with your dinner. My dad said, just a minute. And he looked at me, and from his bed, he said to me, let's hide. It was one of the funniest things I ever experienced. And then Kevin, Scott, I'm going to ask you to remember this with me. There was a story at Red Robin Hamburger Restaurant. You know, at Red Robin, they give balloons out to the little children. So everybody's leaving the restaurant after dinner, and my dad's walking out in the lobby. There's a little child who he doesn't know. They have a balloon walking out, and my dad walks up to him and says, I'm sorry, but you can't take that with you. That balloon stays here. It's only for the use while you're here at the restaurant. And we were all, oh boy, what's my dad gonna do now? Last week, Kevin and I were visiting my parents at the nursing home. My dad was sitting in the hallway, and we went up to talk to him, and he started to cry. We asked him, what's wrong? He shook his head as if to say nothing was wrong. Took his hand, and he waved it. As clear as can be, he said, it's a perfect day because you are here. Remember that? Tuesday night, we were visiting my parents, and my dad needed some help adjusting his blankets. So I got up to help him, and I accidentally pulled the blankets up by his face. And I said, sorry about that. And he just looked at me and said, no problem. And just before we left that evening, a couple of nights ago, my wife and I were talking to my mom about the grandkids, all 4 of the grandkids, and also Maddie. We thought my dad might be listening. We weren't 100% sure, but he was. And my dad just interjected into the conversation when we were talking about all of the grandkids. And he just looked at us and he said, they are good kids. He understood. And this is important for Evan, Josh, Daniel, and Aaron to know and remember. Thank you all for being here to help celebrate the life of my father. I love you, Dad.
In every relationship, there's a two-way opportunity for us to do for others, one for the other, what you mean to me, what I can do for you. And this relationship is not coming to an end, but it is changing. Herbert, who took care of his family for so well for so many years. Now we have an opportunity to take care of you still, today and ongoing. Now we're going to take care of the responsibility that we have to see to it that his body is properly buried here. We'll stand up just for one moment and make the blessing of recognizing the divine justice of life. And then we're going to lower the casket just after. Thank you. You don't have to, Mom. To repeat after me, short lesson. God has given us life. God has taken it away. Herbert, we ask, on behalf of all of us, I ask you to forgive us for anything we've not done appropriately, either today or prior, not befitting your honor. We ask for your forgiveness, and we ask that in heaven be a force of blessing for your family and for the Jewish people. Like now we're going to take an opportunity to perform the last mitzvah of the day, burial. When you're passing the shovel, the tradition is not to pass it directly, put it back in the dirt, and let the next person take it. Watch it. Yeah. We'll help you. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to come forward if you'd like to participate in this mitzvah. Come over toward me. A little bit more. No, a little bit more. A little bit more. You're good. You're there. You go. Right there. You're right there.
Thank you.
More than being symbolic, our obligation here is to feel that this is right here at the moment, at least minimally accomplished. So we'll just take a few more minutes to make sure that the coffin is buried. Now say the mourner's Kaddish. Remember that when we're buried, always buried with our feet towards Jerusalem, which is that way. Part of expressing our ultimate national dream, that all of our sorrows to be resolved into final peace and blessing in Jerusalem on Finland, in peace. We're going to say now together the mourner's Kaddish. Yiskadal, Yiskadash, Shemei Rabban, Yalma, Yivarach, Yerusei, Yablik, Malchusei, V'chayekon, V'yomekon, V'chayei, V'chol Beis Yisrael, V'agolav, V'zman Karev, V'imru, Amen. V'hei Shemei Rabban, V'varach, V'olam, Omer, Yom, V'zborach, V'yishtabach, V'yizboach, V'yisramam, V'yisnaz,